Martha, Martha. Poor Martha. I think Martha's been misunderstood over the years. I mean, how many of us would not have felt the same way, right? You know? I see people, yeah. You know, you can just imagine a scenario. You know, I mean, you know, the going out and the getting of the fine food and the fine, you know, even perhaps thinking, what would Jesus like? You know, perhaps, you know, and what would be his favorite meal and all the preparations, all the setting of the table. I mean, anybody's been over our house for a meal, my wife loves to set that table. She loves to set that table. And she loves to set it with some of the finest things that we have. You know, a theme that comes out throughout our readings today, beginning with our Old Testament reading, is this clear understanding of hospitality. Hospitality that was so essential in the Jewish tradition, okay? That whole Bedouin tradition of, the traveler, the foreigner, the pilgrim. You welcomed them. You know, you at least gave them to drink and something to eat. Well, a feast was set before these people. And it's going to lead to ultimately a blessing that Sarah's going to laugh at, you know, when she's told that she's going to have child. But they say that they will return, and when they return, certainly they will have had child. Hospitality is essential. And I don't think the Lord is trying to take away from this wonderful gift that poor Martha, she's not even scolded for it, okay? Martha, Martha, what does he say? You're worried. You're distracted about many things. You're worried. You're distracted about many things. How many of us now, in the past, we certainly know things will happen in the future, we get worried. We get distracted. And Jesus is telling us clearly in our gospel today, he points to a couple of ways that perhaps Martha, like I said, and each and every one of us need to step back from, need to look at and see perhaps what we've lost sight of. And help us to understand what is really, really important. Which somehow, clearly Jesus points that Mary has been able to see. Worry. You know, all of us have that. Have had that. Will have that. You know, there's an anonymous quote about worry. It says, a small trickle of fear, this is worry, a small trickle of fear that meanders through the mind until it cuts a channel into which all other thoughts are drained. It all consumes us until all other thoughts are drained. Worry incapacitates us. You know, worry can destroy us. We know that. Mind, body, and spirit, if we allow it to. And distraction. God knows, I mean, it's not just our society, but clearly even more so today. We live in a world, that supplies us with endless distractions. Endless distractions for us, as sons and daughters of our God, endless distractions from faith. We have so many things that can grab for our attention in so many ways, shapes, and forms that we become distracted. And ultimately, we can become separated from our God. You know, there was a story I heard about a family that, went out to eat. They went out to eat, and they were a faithful family. And, the husband, before they sat down, looked over at another table. And when he looked over at the other table, he saw another family. He saw another family. And he saw another family with their heads bowed and looked like their hands together. And he said to his family, See that? We're going to offer our prayer. Now look at that family, how wonderful it is that they're gathering together, even in a public place, and they have their heads bowed in prayer. Then all of a sudden the father at that other table lifted up his cell phone that he had been vigorously, and then each and every other one, there were actually 2 cell phones and 2 tablets that the children had. They weren't actually in prayer. They were busily texting and involved in what distracts us today. How many of us find ourselves in family gatherings and instead of people sharing with one another, people are busily texting with one another. Distractions. The distractions that affect us humanly, but distractions that clearly can have effect upon us as sons and daughters of our God. We need to be constantly reminded of what is most important. Paul Tillich has a wonderful quote that I'd like to share with you. Paul Tillich said, and again, philosopher and theologian, there are innumerable concerns in our lives and human life generally, which demand our attention. And many of them rightfully so. They demand our attention, our devotion, and our passion. But they do not demand infinite attention. They do not demand unconditional devotion. And they do not demand the ultimate passion. They are important, and yes, they are indeed often very important for you and for me and for all of humankind. But they are not ultimately important. And as he says this in reference to this reading today, Jesus reminds us that there is only one thing, and that Mary has chosen the better part. That's what needs to grab our attention. That is what will help us to not be distracted. That is what will help us perhaps to not worry and to be able to center and move forward. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, that the birds of worry, care, and distraction fly above your head, this you cannot change. This you cannot change. But that you allow them to build nests in your hair, this you can prevent. This you can prevent. They're going to be all around us. They're going to affect us. But we allow them to take such deep root and control us that not only can we avoid, but we need to. We need to allow that to happen. And our worry, our distraction affects our world, affects one another, and God knows it affects our children. You can tell where families have some healthy ability to process and to move forward, and when it's not. And the bottom line is, our worries and our distractions can clearly affect our children, the little ones. There's no doubt whatsoever. I remember growing up, and there was a point in time, I was very young, I was probably, I think it was in the 4th grade, and I remember, hearing my parents worry. There was all this worry, and I didn't realize it at the time, but apparently my father had lost a job. And there's all this concern about what's going to happen and how they're going to take care of things and what's going to be going on. And here I am, and I'm listening. They don't know I'm listening, but I'm listening, And I remember, I became consumed with this. I became consumed, I guess, with their worry. And I remember downstairs, in the Bronx, downstairs was a candy store. And we don't have candy stores like that in Florida. Anybody remember what a candy store was like in New York? Right, you know, with the stools and everything of that nature, and you can get your malteds and your floats. And anybody know what an egg cream is? Oh, you do, right? Little seltzer water and spritz, and yeah. And they used to put an egg in it for many, especially people who suffered from anemia. You know, I didn't, but so I had my. But I used to love going down to Sam's candy store. Down to Sam's candy store. Sam, a Jewish man. A very wise Jewish man. I went down to Sam's candy store, and he must have seen something in my face, and he said, "Tom, what's the matter? What's the matter?" And I said, Sam, I need a job. I need a job. He goes, "What?" I said, "I need a job. I need a job." He goes, "What are you talking about, you need a job?" "No, I need a job. I need a job." He said, sit down, have an egg cream. He gave me an egg cream, and he gave me a pretzel, you know. And not the pretzels in the bag, but they came in a container. And you know, you remember those? Anyway, sat down, had an egg cream, had a pretzel, and he said, "You okay now?" I said, "Well, yeah. But Sam, I need a job. I need a job." And he said, "Well, you want a job? I'll give you a job." He said, you come down here, you talk to your parents, and if they let you, you can come down here Sunday mornings at 3:30. Sunday mornings at 3:30. I said, "What?" He said, "Sunday mornings at 3:30, and you can help me put together the papers." You know, the papers even today come in sections. You know, and the Sunday paper has sections, and somebody's got to put them together. Somebody's got to put them together. So I somehow I convinced my family. I don't know, and I ended up putting together the New York Times, the Daily News, and whatever, the Post at the time, I think, too. Sunday mornings at 3:30. I was down there. Putting together, half asleep, but I'm putting together, and I'm putting together. And I'll never forget, he came up to me at one point, and he said, "Tom, what are you doing?" And I was like half asleep, and I said, "I'm putting the papers together. I'm putting the." And he came up to me, and he didn't hit me, but he kind of tapped me on the face, and he said, and I was like, What? He goes, "The nuns, they taught you how to pray?" I said, "Yeah." He said,